They wanted to be commercial airline pilots or just sort of amateur guys driving, or perhaps executive flyers flying a businessmen around. Did they talk about big planes?
I myself talked a few moments with Atta, the smaller guy, a little longer with the big guy. My understanding was that they came over to be a professional pilot to go back to their own country to fly commercial airlines.
To fly big planes?
That was what they told us.
Did they say they were going to fly big planes like the ones they used yesterday to attack the World Trade Center?
90% of my people who are flying with us, they want to be a professional pilot. They don't want to be a professional pilot in a Cessna 172. They want to fly big planes. When they come over for training, we train them only in small planes. As I learned today from the media, that in November, when these two students took their test with Whitman, as you mentioned before, the FAA designator examiner, they went to another flight school to obtain a jet experience. We do not train for jets. We only train for small aircraft. There is, in my opinion, no way, and I only fly 20 years, no way that these boys, animals as I call them today the whole day, could have flown a jet. I have seen what the jets did. They changed their route and they did a 90-degree to the left turn. I don't think it's possible. I know one thing that I learned today. They left after our school with a basic license, starting to learn to fly. They flew with another flight school for jet training. And they had to have other training to get knowledge about the airline planes.
Where do you believe they took their second level training fly when they learned to fly jets? Where was that?
I have heard today that there's a company in Pompano Beach, Florida, Pompano Beach Jet Center. This has not been confirmed. I have learned today a lot more about these two students than I ever knew before. I do 300-400 students through Huffman Aviation. I own another flight school in Naples. We do more students in Naples than in Venice. Most of them are foreigners, 60–70%. When the students are done with their course, whatever course they take, private or commercial or multi-engine, when they leave us, we don't know where they go. There's no reasons for us to check that out. And I want to say one thing, what you mentioned before, how to get they in the States. When these people came in, they came in through the front door and they were already at a flight school in the United States. Apparently they were not happy and told my student coordinator that they wanted to go from one school to the other. I don't know why they left the other school. One of the two had a license, but they ended up with Huffman Aviation. And
were they here on student? Were they here, Rudy, on student visas, or what kind of documentation did they have? Did they present to you, or did they not present any documentation?
I personally don't know that due to the fact that I have people taking care of several jobs. My student coordinator who took them in took copies of their passports, what they don't need to do. We're not required when you walk into the store to get copies of your passports. The federal agents were.
Well, let me ask you for something else you wouldn't be responsible to. Let me ask you again about the question of whether they expressed any political views that aroused anybody's interest during the time they were your students at the flight school.
No, after this morning 7 o'clock, when I was notified that my school was involved with maybe training people on the hijacked planes, I talked to all the people who were involved, everybody who knew these guys. Nobody ever had any clue that they were doing or preparing for actions what they did. Obvious, if we would had known everything, we would call the authorities.
Well, you were in a tough situation. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight on MSNBC.
Well, I want to say one more thing, please. That's important for the flight school. We do not train people for these jets. We train people for 172s, small twin engines, and they go to other schools for other training.
I understand completely. You were very clear tonight, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Dekkers. More information coming in right now. NBC News has learned just now the New York City police have mobilized at the Empire State Building. We're looking at it now. And the Empire State Building, along with New York's Pennsylvania Station, have both been evacuated. Very familiar buildings in New York, in the New York skyline. Police say a bomb-sniffing dog responded positively, so it's not just a hoax. Anyway, NBC's Pete Williams has more on the investigation. Pete?
Chris, good day to you. It's come a long way in just the few hours since the attack. It's really an investigation that has proceeded at a pace that federal investigators
Louisiana.
During that time, did you sense a degree of anger aboard Air Force One?
I think it was more a sense of shock in the country. There was an anger, but it was just a total shock that hard to comprehend.
Huffman Aviation. Rudi Dekkers owns that school. He's in Venice, Florida this morning. Mr. Dekkers, good morning.
Good morning to you.
How was it that you first came in contact with these men?
I have heard yesterday from my employees, because I don't have contact with every student that walks in, that these two individuals came in July in 2000, checked our facility, said that they were flying in another facility in Tampa. They were not happy at that facility. They came back after a couple of days and decided that they wanted to fly with us.
So were they learning to fly from square one, essentially?
No, Mr. Atta had a private pilot license already, and I see he, if I pronounce right, he had only a few hours. They did a private pilot license with us, single engine commercial and multi-engine commercial, with the plane that you can probably see behind me. That is the heaviest equipment that we have here, and there's no capability for them to fly a jet after our training.
Mm-hmm. The FBI visited you just a few hours ago and confiscated some records. Can you tell us about that?
It was yesterday, 2:30 a.m. They called my managers here in Venice and wanted to see two files. My people gave the files to them. I came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. They were still there. I talked briefly with them. They were ready to go. I told them that we have more customers, clients from the Middle East, and I thought it was a good idea to give them all my files. So I gave them a couple of hundred files from the last years.
In fact, you're also standing in front of the plane where they trained in. Did they inspect that at all?
No, the FBI had no, not to my knowledge, inspected that airplane. As I said, it's a very light airplane. Also, I want to make the public sure that we only train people. We do not issue the licenses. The licenses are issued by the U.S. government after an FAA representative does the flight test. I have learned yesterday that after November 2000 that they left this facility and went to a flight school in Pompano Beach where they had additional training for jets, because it's just impossible with our license to fly these jets.
Were you suspicious, Mr. Dekkers, of these men in any way?
No, not at all. The day that all this occurred, we felt very, very sad, like all the other Americans. The next day, we had the problem at our doorstep, and of course you have more problems that way because now it's at our doorstep. My employees here are all very upset with what happened, also because they had these two boys here.
I understand that, but let me ask you this. One of these men is widely considered to be responsible for a bus bombing in Israel. How was it that they could gain admittance to your school?
Well, they didn't came through our paperwork like they're calling from Europe, and we know 2 months ahead that they're showing up. As I said, they came from another flight school out of Florida. Probably that flight school did all the INS paperwork with them in their country. I don't know how they attended. I know that we are not obligated to get passports or copies of their passports when somebody walks into the door, although my student coordinator, who talked to them when they came in and negotiated with them, took copies of their passports, and it showed that one of them was out of Afghanistan. And when the FBI came in here, they were happy to see that we had copies of their passports.
I guess it takes on new meaning this morning for you and your employees there, the fact that these men trained at your facility. And I know it's difficult because you, in some sense, feel a little bit of responsibility, don't you?
No, we don't feel responsible for what happened at all, not nothing. We have asked ourselves, could we have known? Was there anything? There was nothing. We have 48 employees. There's nothing that we could have done. These people, animals, as I call them already for more than 24 hours, dealt also with other people in Florida. I mean, they went to hotels, they bought gas, they went to grocery stores. They behaved like people as we all are. Of course, they're not the same people as we are, but there is no blame for Huffman Aviation on this, in my opinion.
Rudi Dekkers, I appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I have one point to mention. If
Very
you have
quickly,
a few
I have no
seconds.
time.
I think there is a system in airline planes to prevent that somebody can take the control. All these airline planes have heavy equipment. If there would be a panic button from the captain, that the moment he pushed that in, that the controls are taking over by the autopilot, by the systems.
Okay. I have to let that be the last word. Rudi Dekkers, thank you in Florida this morning. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome, ma'am.
The brokerage firm of Cantor Fitzgerald had more than 1,000
person like you see every day, and that was the only contact I had. I did talk to them about where you're from, what are your plans in life, and they indicated to us that they wanted to fly big airplanes back home. They indicated to us also when they came into the front door in Venice that they came from another flight school and they were not happy at that flight school and they wanted to finish the training with us.
Yeah, one of the other students at your school has said already that he tried to socialize with them on a number of occasions and they seemed to stick to themselves. How many hours did they actually log in training before they got their certificates?
That had to be around 250 hours because that's the minimum requirement you need for the for the commercial license. The commercial license they obtained here is the plane you can probably see behind me. That is the heaviest equipment we have here as Hoffman Aviation, and as you can see, that is nothing compared to the planes that they hijacked. Also, to my knowledge yesterday from the media is that after they left my school here, November, December, they left to Pompano Beach and did some jet training over there because we're not capable to give them any jet training.
Yeah, there have been so many questions in the last 24 hours, Mr. Dekkers, about, would the training they received on that plane you talk about behind you have qualified them or made them able to guide a 757 or 767 jetliner?
Well, in my opinion, not. But I'm not professional in the big airplanes, only in the small stuff. I have asked several captains, is it possible? And they said, well, we don't think it's possible. They had to, they changed direction, they changed altitude, they had to know knowledge about the avionics equipment to change the pilot, autopilot. In my opinion, not. But I'm not a professional in the big planes. Although, does it matter? We have found out yesterday that they went to another school to obtain more instructions or basic instructions on the jet planes. They only had here the small stuff.
And obviously they had access to flight manuals, some of which have been found, and unfortunately the cold hard truth is they didn't have to know how to take off or land these jets. They only needed to be able to steer them somewhat and to hit their targets. I know you mentioned you had about 60% of your students are foreigners, so there would have been no immediate reason to suspect these people, and that would be a dangerous assumption anyway, but have you asked yourself 100 times in the last day or so, did you miss a sign of some kind?
7 o'clock yesterday morning, I asked myself, could I? Was there anything? I asked all my employees because I don't have too much regular contact with the customers. I asked my instructors who instruct them for 4 months. There was no socializing. They never talked about religion, not even talked about girls. I mean, two subjects are always hot in the aviation industry. It's aviation and girls. They never socialized. They never talked. They were by themselves, and there's nothing. And of course, we ask ourselves here, as the group of people, could we? No, no. They came into the front door. We did not help them with any visa. They were in the United States. There was a license issue from the government to get into the country through another school or through another organization. We did ask their copies of their passports. I can't recall 2 of them where they came from. There was in the file. The FBI was extremely happy that we had copies of their passports, and that's all we could do. They behaved normal, as Dave Whitman said, the designated examiner from the FAA. They behaved normal. They were average people, and that's it. They left in November, December. We don't keep a track of all the students who come over here, and they left out of our eyesight. Till yesterday, of course.
Might you be more skeptical of new students in the future, which I guess would be a kind of a sad thing if that happens?
Well, of course we have to think about what are the rules and regulations, what's the government doing on this. We have sometimes, I own 2 flight schools, one down in Naples, and we do a lot of foreigners there too. We also have sometimes refused visas for these students due to the fact that the government don't want to let them come in. And then, well, of course, that is logical. If they don't want them, fine. My feeling is right now, if we have people coming from the Middle East, if they are still allowed to come back into this country, what we will do is send the file to the local FBI, just fax them the information. At least we gave them then the file of if we have a suspicion. We have a natural act in this, and that's we're going to suspect everybody